Well, I'm waiting for seals to come around, waiting for my dinner, but they're not coming around at all. Normally, we have a lot of seals here this time of year, but either they're very late coming down from up north, or because it's been so warm. This is October 12th now. Normally most of this ocean water in the lagoon will be frozen, but it's not even showing any signs of freezing up. We hear a lot about this global warming, and we certainly believe that it's happening because we're having a lot of problems with very high water from the ocean, water level rising, eroding our island away.
Including the villages of Point Hope, Shishmaref, Kivalina, and Red Dog Fort. Cloudy with numerous showers and areas of fog. Highs in the lower 40s to lower 50s. Southwest wind 5 to 15 miles per hour. I'll give you climate information for today. The normal high for today 60 degrees. The normal low for today 49 degrees. Sunrise this morning was at 3:28 a.m. Sunset will be at 2:28 a.m. early Friday, giving us 22 hours and 58 minutes of possible sunshine. That is a loss of 1 minute and 2 seconds from yesterday. You are listening to
You could use a white basin here too. Instead of the black one. We're finishing off our emergency project as a result from the storm from last October 5 to 7. And they'll run from this end all the way to the center of town, which is about 406 feet. Go ahead, throw them down. That's good enough. Chris, what we're putting in right now is only temporary protection. So it all depends on the storm. You know, each year it's worse. You can see the gabions we put in last year. You can see how much footage that we've lost since last fall.
The projections in Alaska are for much greater amounts of warming. There will be less snow cover, and so there will actually be then the darker earth will warm and amplify the warming signal there. And so let's look at the 2050s. The range is from 3 to 4 degrees. In the 2080s, in the highest scenario, it's going all the way up to 7 degrees C. This is huge amounts of warming.
Continue to affect the group. And the forecast for tonight, mostly cloudy with occasional showers, heavy at times with a few squally thunderstorms. West to northwest winds 10 to 15 knots with fire cast near thunderstorms. A westerly swell 2 to 3 meters affects the group.
This line here used to be there, along there. where the gabion baskets are. Now the shoreline is about 3 meters inland. Land interval is not growing. Instead, it's getting lesser and lesser with the rising sea level. Tuvalu is a very low-lying atoll. It's only 3 to 4 meters high on top of the water. When you have a rising sea level growing up over the years, it is a threat. It is a real threat to the lands that we have now. Even in one of the islands that used to be there, at Tepuka, it's now the old islet where you used to have a bigger tree and it's all gone. Now it's just a reef. No more land there. It's very sad to see the island, part of the islands disappearing. You know, where I used to play, it's disappearing away, never to appear again. I don't know.
We see for the South Pacific site not as great amounts of warming for the island itself as we saw in Alaska. But both will be subject to the global sea level rise. Probably these are the most vulnerable places across the whole Earth in terms of habitation, of human habitation. These are on the front lines of the global warming, and as you've seen, and the inhabitants of these islands are seeing, these effects are already starting to happen.
Plenty of sunshine for the afternoon hours. It'll stay chilly though, high 36. Watch for the freezing of wet areas as we go into the evening hours. Clear and cold tonight, low 24 in Midtown, 16 in many suburbs. The wind drops off for a few hours. We've actually dropped into the single digits in some of the coldest suburbs. This with snow cover is very common. It's happened all across the Midwest. Sunshine not as cold tomorrow, high 42. Sunday times of clouds and sunshine, high 46 degrees. Monday colder again with sunshine, high 34. No storms are coming.
This is the Rockaway Peninsula. It's on the southeast side of New York City, so Manhattan is over that way. In fact, we're standing here on what's called a barrier island. And barrier islands are very important in this part of the world. They're big chunks of sand that protect the inhabited areas, as we see over there, very densely inhabited, from storms and from tides. The problem is that in the future, global warming will bring about further sea level rise. And sea level rise gradually eats away at the sand, erodes it, or submerges it. And over time, these barrier islands will not just move towards the mainland, they may gradually disappear. Yeah, right around here, let's see, 42, 48, 51, 54, 60. Okay, so let me show you. This is maybe a foot higher than at the edge of the water, okay? Okay, if the sea level goes up 2 feet, which is kind of the average prediction for the end of the century, then right up to here, it's completely taken away. When the storms come in, it pushes the water 3, 4, 5, and the 100-year storm is 10 foot higher. Well, 10 feet is, you know,
back there.
It's all the way back where the stores are. So during the storms, this will all be flooded, the whole thing.
New York City, flooded to a depth of many feet, staggers under the fury of a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane lashing America's Atlantic seaboard. Along the exposed waterfront, homes are wrenched from their foundations to become a scattered mass of floating debris. Thousands are made homeless by the swirling waters, and while the evacuation of families goes on, a state of emergency is proclaimed in New York. LaGuardia Airport, under 3 feet of water, becomes more like a mooring for flying boats than New York's busiest airfield.
New York City has 3 major airports, and all of them sit very close to the sea level. The airport's always flooded during major storms that are typical of happening once every 100 years. The trouble is that in the future, those 100-year floods may happen as often as almost every year. And you can see that right here. This causeway, which carries the subway out to Rockaway, is built very close to sea level, and already in storms it would be flooded. And this is just an indication of all the very expensive infrastructure that was built right close to sea level by people who didn't realize that sea level rise would ever be a problem.
Thousands of people were evacuated as America's northeast coast was hit by the worst storms in over a generation. Governors in 3 states declared emergencies. New Jersey took the brunt with winds up to 90 miles an hour and tides 5 feet higher than normal. Getting around was precarious as New Yorkers battled hurricane-force winds and the city's subway system was closed. Those who had to travel had to find their own means.
What you see on the screen are 2 simulations of the models of 2 possible futures. And this is the one on the right is for lower amounts, and this one is for higher amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. We never just do one projection, because if you do one projection, you're going to start to believe it. Oh, yes, this is our prediction of the future. We always look at a range of projections, in this case 2, but in other cases 3, 4, 5, and many, because we need to know the range from the best case to also the worst case. What we call them is scenarios of the future. Now, there we see greater amounts of warming leading in the 2080s to 3.5 degrees warming here, which is a considerable amount of warming. I think all the islands are both facing very serious threat from and vulnerability to the sea level rise. That's what we identified in our coastal city of New York. But these levels are so high that it's really potentially very, very different ways of life. So it's definitely a concern. I would say. Definitely a concern.
You ready? We're gonna go to the corner. Come on, this way. I first got interested in this whole thing when I was a little boy. I used to be fascinated by weather. I used to stare out the window at the snow falling, and I used to keep a little weather journal. So I've always been kind of a weather nut.
Well, we've had no snow for at least 2 years, so the last time he went sledding, he was 2 years old. He's 4 now, so that's half of his entire life that he hasn't been sledding, and we don't know when there'll be snow again. So we really wanted to take advantage of today and go sledding because this is the first really nice snowfall we've had in, as I said, 2 years.
Let me go.
No, we'll do it together. You sit right there.
This is the start of my garden. That's from there to there and to the end. And it goes up the other side. Come around. When I come down to my traditional garden, it's a place where I can sort of get away from the new type of life, sort of trying to get it there. But I get down to work at something which is the actual thing that I live on that. Even if I don't get any pay from anywhere, I can still live with this. When I work, I talk to myself, I talk to the plant. I even say, I plant this for my grandchildren, for my children, and all this. This one, I started working since 1978. But then there have been problems with these. They go brown because probably of the sea from underneath the level of the sea. See, you can see now the is wet. The level of the sea, salt water is up somewhere there, up and down. Because it's too salty, they started to get brown, every plant. So I have to go higher.
I always just do it trial and error.
I always have a cigarette.
That's in the lagoon in front of the corral, almost to the left a little bit.
You guys just shoot them from the boat?
Yeah, I tried with the pistol at first. I've never forgotten what my grandpa said to me. I always ask people if they're hungry, feed them. And he says, never ask for pay either, because your pay is going to be when you go hunting. The game is going to be easy to get. Of course, when we were growing up, there was no such thing as you tell somebody to haul you water. We didn't ask them as kids, how much are you going to pay me? We just did it, for the sake of being a community member. So. Lifestyle nowadays is a lot different. Grandparents and our parents were so strict in this community. There used to be just maybe a 3-foot wide path that everybody walked down. And on the side of that little path that people walked on, there was flowers, grass. It was a beautiful little town. But nowadays it's all sand. I heard that there's quite a bit of money to dig out the coffins and move them. And
From what I understand, there is more money to move the dead than to save the alive ones. So.
Ed, could you give me a hand here? Oh, big man. Okay, we got to turn it around. We're having a public meeting. It's a meeting to update the public on our erosion and relocation issues. Okay, this is Shishmaref here. And then these sites are the potential evacuation sites that we're going to be doing soil studies.
That discussion is going to come later. Hi.
Hello. Yeah, geez, long time no see, huh?
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, all right.
Today is Wednesday, July 10, and I'll call this meeting to order at 12:45. I'll ask Pastor Tim Oslovich to do the invocation.
Let us pray. Lord our God, our Creator, maker of heaven and earth, we give you thanks that you continue to watch over us and protect us in these days when we fear storms on the sea. We pray that you will continue to guide our coalition as they make decisions. We pray too for people who make decisions in other places, people at the state and federal government, that you will give them wisdom and compassion to help us with our problems. And we ask, Lord, that you would bless us as we gather today, so that your Spirit would be with us, that we might make good decisions and be encouraged to do your work and save our village. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Tim.
I do not know what is going to happen if these islands are submerged. Where are we going to be relocated? That I do not know now, and I haven't made any arrangements for it.
The possibility to be moved. Yes, I think that it will be very, very hard, especially for us older people who have been brought up here, you know. And also because it was our country, our land, and everything it's our country, it's my land. If I move away, I have to sort of get used to another type of land. And because it doesn't belong to me from the start, it belongs to other people. I have to follow their way of life. I suppose I have to.
People are Christian people and they believe in God. They believe that God created these islands. They are going to remain here forever. And personally, I too also believe in that.
Water off.
We like the local food here, the fish, the seal, the ducks, and then if we have to move to a different village or something, then we're gonna miss our own food here. That's our biggest concern. We don't wanna move away from this area.
This is where that new village is gonna be, behind them hills, New Shishmaraf. So maybe behind those hills someplace will be New Shishmaraf for you kids. When you get married, you'll have new house, new village. The new village is gonna have to be at least 2 or 3 miles away from this coast, which means that docking of our boats we're gonna have roads to have access to where boats are docked in this bay. So it's gonna be a different lifestyle. We're just gonna have to adapt to it.
Of course, there's pollution all over, in our waters, on the land, in the air. So that has a lot of effect on all the animals and wildlife that we depend on up here. I'm sure it comes from, it's not coming from here, it's coming from somewhere else. Big cities, possibly maybe factories, and a lot of other things that happened years ago, which is causing it to occur now, the way I see it.
Variety of human activities lead to the emissions of the greenhouse gases, but the most important ones are the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas, which powers our society. More than 3/4 of the energy that humans produce and use comes from the burning of fossil fuels, and this produces carbon dioxide. The reason for that is the fossil fuels themselves originate in plants that took carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere long ago, millions of years ago, and were buried deep underground. Now the human beings are pulling up in the space of 200 or 300 years, millions of years of carbon sediments, and we're turning them into carbon dioxide, and that is going to have a profound effect on the climate. So every time you turn on the switch to make a refrigerator run or an electric light bulb turn on, at the power plant end of the wires, usually carbon dioxide is produced. So this is very fundamental to almost all our activities, heating homes, running factories, you name it. Carbon dioxide is basically involved in the equation somewhere.
Okay.
This is a nice 16, 17-pound turkey, and to cook it without any stuffing would take maybe 2 hours, but I'm going to put all this stuffing in it, and then it's going to take 3 hours. And the reason is that instead of just having this shell, this thin shell of meat, you've got all this other stuff on the inside that has to be heated up. And that's a lot like the Earth with regard to global warming. The atmosphere is a very thin shell. And actually, if the whole story was the greenhouse effect, the atmosphere would heat up very quickly, almost immediately, essentially, in response to the buildup of gases. But that's not what happens. Because the oceans act a lot like the stuffing, they kind of are this huge additional mass, which the thin shell of the atmosphere is in contact with. There's a lag, an inertia. The heating corresponding to the buildup can drag out 30, 40, 50 years or longer. The second consequence is that when you finally are able to start limiting the amounts of the gases in the atmosphere, there's a long lag between the actions you might take in terms of limiting emissions and the effect on temperature. You have to think decades and centuries even in advance. But it's starting to become apparent to most scientists that if we don't act soon, there's an increasing risk that something will go seriously awry.
It's only when we put in the realistic increase in the greenhouse gases that we have observed that we can then do an accurate simulation of the temperature warming, of the warming that we've had so far. And this is one of the major reasons why the scientists are bringing forward the issue that global warming is real, because in our scientific understanding, we cannot explain what we see unless we put in those gases.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see you.
The younger ones are lagging as usual.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, how are you?
Arthur?
No. We used to live in Soho for many years.
At the Cafe Dante.
All right.
You publish both articles
both
on the
monthly
internet.
updates, right? So if you're interested in weather events that are happening around the world, droughts here, or big storms there, or El Nino, or whatever's happening with the coral reef somewhere, or something like that, I will throw that in. So yeah, because
they can wipe the face.
that's a good idea. Why don't you put them on top of the plate?
Michael and I were saying on Friday afternoon that for us, and I'm sure for you too, that it's been something that we've been talking about for a long time, projecting into the, at the end of the 21st century, to have it be happening so visibly, so concretely already, with beginning to have these downstream effects is actually quite amazing, I think, for us who have been working in the area for a long time.
Well, it's a weird mixture, both very disturbing and gratifying at the same time. It's very scary. It's very scary because, whatever is happening now to us is going to be, 10 times, 100 times worse for our kids. So I just feel sometimes outraged and upset for their sake, if not for my own sake, that we're giving them this horrible legacy that they're going to have to deal with one way or another.
That's right, I remember that. That's right. Here's some
pull it back now, or?
No, they're just lifting it up a foot so when they come back in November, they don't want it frozen to the ground. Every storm, it gets worse, you know. Yeah, they moved those two houses down there. Their front yard was a cliff, you know. And they moved them back 50 feet.
Oh, they did already?
Yeah, they already moved them. Right. Davis's house and Ruben's. They moved them 50 feet with no problem. They didn't even move no furniture inside, nothing. They jacked them up, put grease on planks and slide them. Real simple. They didn't even move the pictures or anything on the wall.
My name's Roger Thompson. I have a company I call myself Level Best Engineering. I move buildings and I level buildings as we're sitting on frozen ground, mostly in western Alaska. As the ground melts, the houses settle. And when a house becomes, the doors don't work, too many cracks in the rock, it looks unsafe, it's going to fall over, that's when I get a call. Well, this house here, I moved it back about 50 feet. The front door was right here, had about 20 feet left to go before it went in the ocean. So we moved it back far enough that, Lord willing, it'll be here for at least another month. As the weather changes, well, I get more work, so I can't say that it's threatening my way of life. I get all the work I want because houses are sinking, we have to move them. We don't get as many crabs, we charge more money, you know. So, heck, maybe in a few years we'll start planting bananas, you know.
To us who have done little, contributed nothing to this problem, for us to be told to adapt, to be on our own and try to cope with these adverse effects, this is to us, it's like a denial of the right to exist.
Hello, Ambassador of Tuvalu. Yes, yes. Are you going to call names?
Yes. My colleague, Mr. Bradford Smith, is going to be here, and he's going to announce the name in the alphabetical order.
His Excellency, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Permanent Representative of Tuvalu.
For Tuvalu, joining the United Nations was a big decision. I mean, we had to wait something like 23 years after independence because financially the costs very high, almost unbearable by a poor resourced island country like Tuvalu.
We have come together today to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The oceans and the seas are vitally important for the Earth's ecosystem.
The addressing of climate change or the adverse effects of global warming is the priority aim of this mission.
Thank you very much for acknowledging the ratification of the convention. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
If the convention is to succeed in meeting these threats, cooperation and coordination between states must be improved.
Equality is provided for in the Charter of the United Nations. Every member has the right to speak. Every member has the same vote. Of course, we can, and we are trying to take advantage of that equality of treatment in the United Nations.
I now give the floor to the Permanent Representative Tuvalu. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Moderator, a question that has come up is to what extent are the provisions of the convention to take care of the rights of states, particularly those that are now predicted to be affected seriously by effects of climate change, particularly sea level rise.
Thank you very much. I think that's an interesting question, sir.
Some days, I just come home and just ask myself, what am I doing here? People don't seem to listen to me. I don't seem to be getting anywhere. Nobody seems to be paying attention to what I'm saying about the problems that Tuvalu is facing because of global warming. On a good day, we're doing 30 minutes by car.
That's the same with me.
But then if traffic is bad, I don't know, 1 hour, 1.5 hours.
Hi, Michael. This is so lovely.
Yeah, it was great.
Really a lot of fun. It's very nice for the families to get together.
You have great kids.
So do you.
So thank you for coming up. Yeah, to mention. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about Tuvalu in terms of its sea level rise vulnerability. How close to sea level does most of the land lie?
Well, nowhere in Tuvalu is above 2 meters of the sea level. Erosion of the coastal region is a major problem. And that's why we keep on asking, we need financial assistance, technical assistance from the developed countries. We don't have scientists in Tuvalu.
I do think Native peoples and other cultures have a better understanding of the relationship of humans and the natural world. And what the global warming issue is, I think, for the developed world is it's actually the means by which we can make those connections despite our incredibly complex, complicated, developed, overdeveloped, highly technical world. And I think that that is the meaning of the issue.
Can I ask one last question? From the scientific data, working way back, is there any possibility of a shift of the climate to stabilize, to remain as it is? So what I'm actually aiming at, or is there any possibility that the scientists might reverse their conclusions on the effects on small island countries like Tuvalu?
Seems unlikely.
It seems unlikely.
One only wishes that we're wrong about this, but I don't see the slightest chance. There's no evidence that I know of, and I imagine you would say the same thing, that as long as these gases keep building up, that the climate will do anything but, over the long-term average, continue to warm.
If Kyoto is implemented and the emissions rates slow and are stabilized, what that will do is limit the amount of warming.
Kyoto should really be viewed as a modest first step, but an important one.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you for
It's really a privilege to talk to you.
Yes, and to you, and to you. Very. Let me get a card for you.
There have been a few things I would rather have not happened, but certainly the day that the World Trade Center was attacked was one of the worst moments of my life, as it was for anybody who lived in New York or in the United States. And it's ironic, before September 11th happened, I used to use a map of this area to talk about global warming, because this is one of the spots where, when storms happen in the future, because of the higher sea level, there'll be substantial amount of flooding. And I had a map I would always show of the World Trade Center with the new water line about in the middle of the foundation during a big storm. And I think it's important. But I stopped showing that picture because I thought it was inappropriate to put the two things, to juxtapose the two things. But as we talk about the future of the city, I think, and rebuilding this area, it's important to remember that other changes are going to happen as well. And the flooding from global warming that could happen if we don't get emissions under control is one of those things. And the people who are planning the reconstruction need to take that into account. In the short term, human beings do a lot of things to themselves and to their cities which are insane, and September 11th was one of them. Over the long term, we're also doing some things without realizing it that are probably equally dangerous and could have even larger destructive effects taken as a whole. And global warming is certainly in the lead in terms of those problems. And that really needs to be taken into account. And we really, just as we're acting to stem future terrorism, we ought to act against this other threat that isn't intentional, but nevertheless, now that we know about it, we have an obligation to try to stop it.
We'll get her. Sooner or later, we'll get her.
Northeast winds 10 to 20 miles an hour with the highs 25 to 30. On the Chukchi seacoast, including Point Hope, Chesmereth, Kevalina, Red Dog Fort. Today, cloudy with scattered snow showers and locally windy. South winds 10 to 20 miles an hour with gusts to 30 miles an hour north of Cape Thompson, diminishing. The high is 27 to 31. Sunrise this morning, 11:32, and will set this afternoon at 3:44. That will give us 4 hours and 12 minutes of daylight. The climatic norms for the
Hello once again to the national news. The Newtown women in the capital commemorated their annual day last Saturday. The commemoration activities held for one day began with breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning and
traffic is very busy on the Brooklyn Bridge both ways, and the BQE taking a pounding near the Brooklyn Bridge as well, and right on down the Gowanus. So the raindrops falling, the traffic is very heavy.
Well, my dinner is not coming around yet.